Creation Roundtable. We'll do our introductions. So I'm Shannon Richardson. I'm with the University of Mississippi, and I'm serving mainly as a moderator to kind of keep the flow going. And we have Josh Norris from Oregon State, who is what I like to think of as an excellent content expert. So Josh, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. Like you said, I work with the Adventure Leadership Institute at Oregon State University, and I'm a longtime NIRSA member and member of a few other outdoor and other activity sort of associations. Yeah.
Cool, cool. All right. All right, so we've got a brief icebreaker that Josh is going to walk us through.
Yeah, so as we're thinking about how to unpack a little bit about what's been happening lately, I'd like for you to look at this slide. And I just tried to select a bunch of personal photos. And maybe if you could look at them and ascribe some feelings to them. Maybe just imagine how they relate to your current state, either as a professional or even personally during this time. And if you look at them, maybe if you're feeling compelled, you could decide on a photo and share why you chose that photo in the chat. We'll give you just a few minutes. Great, great. We'll give it maybe another just a few seconds. All right, what do you think, Shannon?
Okay, so let me just kind of briefly go through. A lot of people wish they were climbing. I understand that. A lot of people wish they could have some sort of adventure. A lot of folks are identifying with the dog bed photo. A lot of missing the dog. I can understand that folks might be separated from their dogs right now. Missing adventure, climbing. Yeah. A lot of people identifying with an adventure.
Yeah, that's right. Turns out I selected these photos because I've experienced, or at least was able to ascribe my emotions through much of this to various pieces of it. Feeling both part adventure and part need to rise to the occasion with adversity, part wonder and waiting for something, part also just being around real consequence and still feeling okay about our ability to navigate it. And then also wanting to hide underneath my dogs. So I felt all of those feelings. As we talk about today, one of the things that Shannon and I discussed was just that this conversation is probably different than it ever has been before. And what I mean by that is when we start to talk about things like remote programming or how to serve students remotely, or based upon various pieces of these practices that we're seeing sweep across the nation, what's different about them is that we once compared it to something. We once compared it to in-person programming or virtual versus real and things like that. And we feel like that's just not even a reasonable comparison anymore. It's sort of not even relevant. And so that is part of what changed our ability to sort of think about these things and then redecide how we would go about these things. So Shannon, if you just show everybody what we're going to talk about today, that'd be great.
Absolutely. So we're starting off with discussing where we are now, our initial plan, and how we've had to pivot in these last few weeks. We're going to spend some time talking about this, and this is a roundtable, so please ask your questions in the chat, and we will, I will address those and ask those of Josh. But we've structured this in a way that we're taking, you know, Oregon State kind of as a case study of what they've done. And later in the presentation, we'll absolutely have time to include what all programming and what all ideas that you guys have. And we'll have time at the end for plenty of questions. And at the end, we'll have folks be able to speak. But because there's so many people on the call, we felt it was best to keep it to the chat as far as questions to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're just going to start by giving a little bit of context in each of these realms. So again, there was an initial pivot. Like we really quickly, we needed to make changes and be ready for some of this. So for example, we teach a large slate of academic classes out of our recreation department. And so that includes like roughly around 32 different classes. And we very quickly knew that we weren't going to be able to, in a matter of days, offer some of those classes. And so we had to figure out which ones we could and change those that we couldn't. Some of those started with the initial plan that probably lots of you have, which is the delay plan, right? Just saying like, okay, if we put these field outings or experiences towards the end of the semester or term, maybe we can get to them. Some of them we figured out really quickly, like we teach 3 sections. I mean, we teach a section of local day hikes, which is very much an invitational class for students. We expanded that to 3 sections, roughly to an enrollment of 80 people. And we added another section of mountain biking, and then we're teaching some of our theory courses as well remotely. And those took a ton of work to figure out how to pull that off when students don't have access to not only transportation, but also even in some parts of the state, wildlands. So then we had to figure out, we have students in our certificate in various minors that they were graduating this semester. So they were looking for those requirements to be completed, and we had to create bridges to them. So it required a ton of advising and on phone and on Zoom advising to some of those students. And the biggest trick with that is figuring out something that has and meets programmatic and credential integrity, which we can talk about later, but that might even include things like wilderness medicine certifications. How do you get some of those requirements done if you can't do them in person? And then probably one that interests almost everyone here is general student programming. So what does that now look like for us? We are going to show some of that here in a minute, maybe spend some time as we dive into that, but really we end up adding a bunch of live workshops and seminars, roughly about 3 a week. We have, we turned our social media feeds into tips and tutorial videos that were going out. A bunch of our climbing staff, we rebooted into at-home climbing workouts and live climbing skill webinars, including trying to use multiple cameras to get more what we call tight shots, so up close shots of technical things. And then finally, we've been launching a ton of virtual team building clinics and seminars. Because of the new format in which the whole university is going to, we may be more relevant now than ever before. And so some of that we've been having to take and offer to not only professors, but also others that would run these types of meetings. And then finally, or I guess almost finally, student staff training and support. And this was a big deal, especially in the early days. We immediately deployed every single one of our staff to make an over the phone, in-person connection with each of the students. So that's student employees, students pursuing credentials with us, and we have a living learning community in one of the residence halls. So connecting with each and every one of those. And then we also hosted a few and are continue to do just live community discussions where they can see each other and interact with their community and ask questions. So, yep. And then with the training piece of that, we've been thinking and paying attention to the fact that we have to be ready to reboot at the end of this. So how will we be in a position that we can restart? Yeah. And then finally, facility maintenance and repairs. There are some of our facilities that cannot be mothballed. So for example, like our challenge course, we just know there's stuff that has to continue out there to keep it ready and operational when the time comes. So yeah, so I think where are we headed next, Shannon?
Okay, yeah, that's great. So again, just to kind of recap, Josh has been speaking about, Oregon State and kind of what they've been doing, kind of as a best practice. But now we're going to get into programming, and this is really a good interactive time. So please ask your questions or give us, in the comments, give us ideas that your institutions have developed to do remote programming. And I will do my best to moderate those, and then Josh can speak, and we'll go, we'll just kind of open up Oregon State's website so you can see kind of some of the things that he has been talking through. Josh, you want to just walk us through this site real quick?
Yeah, so probably like many of you, we have a specific, splash page, if you will, for all things rec sports. In that, then we sort of tier off between our various program areas. We have three pieces of that. One is a link to this, and the other two are links to social feeds, which include everything from, virtual hikes to, tips and tricks, and even just, quick montages of various experiences. But then this is our live event. So these are our remote programs. And it's important to note that there's a wide swath of offerings here. Everything from really fun things that are very much designed to be invitational to other things that almost are affinity building. So they're pulling into specific interests or specific groups. And we've been teaching things like technical climbing question and answer session, which included, turning my coat rack on my wall into an anchor system so that people could talk about very specific types of belay techniques in a multi-pitch environment. And so you can see it's really a wide swath of things. One thing that I think is really important about this, as you probably know, it's all over the news, we sort of knew from the beginning we needed our stuff to be behind some sort of registration wall. We didn't need any, just sort of terrible stuff. I think it is often referred to as Zoom bombing, but we didn't need any of that stuff in our Zooms as we were hosting them. So it really helps to push that stuff. And this one requires a university authentication to get in. So
Josh,
to get access to it. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. So we have a question, was from Madison. Was OSU able to keep their student staff to run the remote programs, or is this done solely by professional staff?
There's a little bit of both in that. So all the live events, for the most part, actually not all of the live events, the majority of the live events were visioned by and are mostly delivered by full-time staff. All of our students are working on, we talked about the staff training pieces that are going on, so they're not ones that are publicly viewable, if that makes sense. So we have events and live trainings going on. Those are being run by students. And then the climbing workouts, the at-home climbing workouts, that content's being generated by students. And some of our, I think we have a class called Efficient Climbers Toolbox, which is being taught via Zoom. And in those, they say things like as prerequisites, if you have this particular equipment or if you have this particular space, you'll be able to participate more fully. Otherwise, you'll be in an observation role. Those classes are being taught by students, but it's greatly diminished, right? The ability to give them the hour load that they once had.
Great, thank you. This is the time now that we love for others to throw out things in the chat as to what your institutions are doing regarding programming.
Hey, Hannah from UNLV. Just some ideas that we've had. We're doing like geocaches in remote hiking areas. So I'm going like all trails, and then I'm filtering by like rarely used trails. And then we're doing different levels of trails, and then I'm filming like as I hike, and then doing some plant ID along the way. And then when I get to the top, I'm dropping coordinates, and then giving like a land acknowledgement as well to the Native peoples, and then posting it on our social media with people, inviting people to come and try to find those same coordinates, take a picture at the top. And then the first like 5 people to repost get a blender bottle, or which is our like most prized giveaway. So we're trying to incentivize people to be out as well, while taking reminding them about the social distancing. That's kind of our most, I'd say, innovative approach.
Thank you, Hannah.
Yeah, that's great.
Anyone else want to chime in with programming? Let's see. Okay, Jason Darby has a quick question here. He's heard of some programs doing geocaching, but is anybody running into any issues with their university discouraging that type of activity because of shelter-in-place orders?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to that. Our university president has been very, very strongly suggesting people need to stay at home. And to that point, they've also statewide tried to differentiate between essential and non-essential travel. Does that make sense? And so, yeah, I think there is, depending on where you're at, there's some different interpretations around how to break transmission chains. And some of those are being legislated, and some of those, we actually had a discussion as a staff 2 days ago around something that we think is a really interesting social phenomenon, which there's a little bit of conflation between good social practice for breaking transmission chains and then fun shaming. And they kind of get squished together sometimes due to the severity of the real problems that are occurring associated with this pandemic. We sometimes find people projecting how other people should be feeling or acting based upon the severity of those consequences. So yeah, I totally hear that comment.
Okay. Madison has commented that they have a travel ban at Eastern Washington, so the staff cannot travel to take videos. Justin at A&M Commerce says that we've been told to shut down disc golf courses. It's open access, but police are kicking folks out, as well as their hammocking area. Donald from Washington State, doing a lot of similar programming as OSU. Did our regular She Poops program about women's hygiene in the outdoors. Very cool. And some remote programs on adaptive climbing and kayaking programs. Oh, this is interesting. So Donald at Washington also says that they're still doing their bike share program because it's considered a critical transportation infrastructure. I don't know if others are doing that. I know Ole Miss is not. Trey at Miami, we can encourage people to get out for walks and runs, but need to do it from their home as to what is hyper local. Here in Oxford, Mississippi, we're similar to that. It's shelter in place, but they are encouraging individual outdoor recreation close to home is kind of how our mayors put it. Let's see, Bradley with Central Washington, ed videos posted to social media, live feeds or pre-recorded content, hiking, cycling challenges with incentive prizes, highlights of local places to go. A lot of Earth Week virtual cleanup. I know that we had a lot of things programmed for that. And some of our students are doing their own so that it's outside of the umbrella of official university responses. A lot of our students have taken upon themselves to go out and to start cleaning trash out of the waterways and things like that. Let's see, VSU posting Instagram challenges for outdoor social distancing, mailing out prizes. Jacob, East Tennessee, hosting a webinar for East Tennessee with local rec leaders to give an update and including that in the region of outdoor recreation practices on Earth Day. That's really cool. Everybody's just trying to navigate the stay-at-home orders, not playing clinics. Let's see. Awesome comments, guys. Sorry, I'm trying to get to most of them. And just so everybody knows, I'm sure you're aware, but everyone will get a transcript of this Zoom meeting as far as like what the comments have shown, and it also is being recorded. So, yeah, Old Dominion's using Strava to encourage physical activity, maintaining appropriate distance. Ole Miss Campus Rec is hosting, along with the Chamber of Commerce, a virtual 5K. And so we're trying to keep folks, active while practicing social distancing. Okay, sounds like we've got a lot of awesome programming. Josh, do you want to jump to our next slide and then maybe circle back with questions at the end? Give a lot more time for comment.
Yeah, that sounds great. I was going to also point out one of the things that we wanted to do as just as an opportunity is we did a webinar last week called social distancing, hiking in the age of social distancing, and it's got a bunch of just really great sort of resources locally in it and so forth. And so I think Shannon, you were going to drop a link or a file in the chat, even up that if y'all want it.
Yes,
and I think all the discussion around how to connect to things like Strava or other tracking devices is a really great thing. We're using that for some of our academic classes. So specifically the mountain biking and the local hikes class. That's how they're sort of substantiating their specific assignments in addition to other things. So yeah. So I think the next slide that we wanted to talk about was really around the repivot. Is that what you wanted to talk about, Shannon?
Yeah, let me do
right?
that. Absolutely. One sec. I was trying to pull the link.
No, oh yeah, sorry.
No, you're good. Just
okay,
go right into the repivot and I'll get the slide.
Yeah. Cool. It's essentially this idea of on the West Coast, we've been in this for a few weeks now. And so we're sort of discovering like, okay, if our peak is in May or June, and then we know that it's not going to be just a quick reintegration or a redo of the previous practices. It's probably going to be a gradual step down or gradual scale down. We're sort of having to think beyond our initial plan, which means things like with wilderness medicine certifications, delay may not be the only option. So especially if, we run a certificate program where we know if we go more than 2 terms without people being able to complete a certificate, they may stop enrolling in a certificate they can't complete. It may just affect their life plans. And so we're thinking about, as the repivot goes, what does this look like? Remote stuff long-term. How do we do things like, for example, we're calling it virtual field trips. And we've been looking to some other fields where they've been doing this, like, for example, in volcanology, there are some units that have done that where they cannot take students into certain spaces, but they need it as a part of learning. And so we're sort of still really exploring what does the repivot look like, and specifically, how are we going to be prepared? So if we don't get this until, say, midway through fall term, how will we have enough climbing instructors that are trained, and enough raft guides that are trained, and enough of all of those particular things that we may need if we've gone 6 months without it? How are we going to be ready to do that? And it may be at a different level. And so I think that's a reasonable question and thing for us to think about as well. It's not just the immediate, how do we do this for the next 3 months, but maybe how do we do this for the next 4 months leading into our original sort of operation.
If folks have comments about that, please drop them in the chat. I'll read them out. Okay. Josh, we may get some more of those toward the end with the questions. But we wanted to, I have 10 minutes up here, but we've flown through some of the earlier, we weren't sure exactly how long it would take, but we certainly want to allow plenty of time for questions and answers and to hear from you all on things that we haven't covered yet. What are some pain points everybody's experiencing? What are just your thoughts on where we're at? So again, at this point, if you've got a comment, just go ahead and unmute yourself and speak to the crowd. Or throw it in the chat and I'll speak.
Yeah, Bradley Gosowski here with Central Washington University. I was just wondering if folks could share a little bit with their experiences. How well are you being supported by your program, whether you're your own standalone academic program or whether you're part of a recreation center or campus rec program, as well as higher level university officials? Are you feeling supported? Do you feel like there's more that people could do? Just love to hear some of those experiences.
Yeah, to answer your question, Alex here with UT Rio Grande Valley. We've done a lot of social meetups, whether it's a 30-minute coffee break where everybody gets on Zoom and chats, or we did a happy hour as well. So just having that team interaction, even though we can't physically get together, has been a big kind of way for us to kind of de-stress and deal with everything that's going on.
Brad, I was going to mention that we've experienced a little bit of a both and around the, or both in both directions around support, if that makes sense. So last Friday, we had a big board of trustees meeting in which during the COVID-19 sort of report, we were the only program called out, if that makes sense. So we got some accolades there from the coordinator of the COVID-19 sort of response for the university. We got some accolades in that. And then at the end of that, the students got approved a 15% reduction of our rec sports fee, which is going to mean that we're going to cut not only student payroll, but we're probably going to have to cut FTE across the department. And we don't even know how we're going to do that yet. And so we're both being held up as an example of what to do. And then at the same time, having money directly taken away for this term, which carries us through summer. So we don't make, the summer fee doesn't work without all three of our other term fees. That makes sense. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks for sharing. We're looking at possible layoffs over here, so our future is a bit uncertain at this time.
Yeah, I think that's not uncommon right now, and we're even deciding or trying to figure out what contractually we're allowed to do, if that makes sense. So if we need to lay off whole or individual positions, or if we're allowed to take a sort of across the top FTE reduction. And so far we've been asking those questions for about a week and a half, and HR has not yet given us an answer.
I wanted to highlight a few of the chat comments. So some of the maintenance questions that have come up is, how are people cleaning, climbing wall and ropes and things of that nature before reopening? Somebody helpfully suggested El Dorado has a COVID-19 page with cleaning information. What's going to happen with boat rentals? So if folks have any suggestions on that, feel free to reply via chat. as far as Katie with San Diego State, how are universities in stay-at-home areas with park closures encouraging students to go outside? We've dealt with this in Oxford. Our governor has mandated that all recreation areas, parks, playgrounds are to be closed specifically except for walking trails. But there's sometimes a disconnect from the state level to the town gown, level, where we have a really nice trail system right beside our rec center, and so that main trail is still open, but the university administration, for whatever reason, decided to close single track bike trails that go off of that main rail bed trail. So there's a lot of things that happen, and we have to react to them based on very little information up the chain. So we're the ones dealing with community outrage, not really outrage, but frustrated patrons of our facilities and our trails, and it's hard to respond to that. Obviously, it's hard to navigate. So totally feel folks on that one. What other questions? You said a 2-week closure would serve as a sort of quarantine from any infection from the wall. Sorry, go ahead.
I wanted to ask if what people are looking at, Josh, when you're talking about for you guys or for anybody else, the repivot, because we're looking at a peak here. They're thinking May, June, like you guys, and we have a hospital, so our upper leadership is talking to infectious disease experts and trying to look at what this looks like 6, 9, 12 months down the road. So if we allow students back on campus in the fall, and open the wellness center and the climbing wall and all that stuff, like this virus isn't gone. We can't say, well, we were closed for 6 months, there's no virus. Like, people are going to be still infecting one another. So I think we're looking at, we read the El Dorado thing, but how do we facilitate equipment rentals and potentially still maintain social distancing? So can we open, but do like Home Depot's doing right now, where we're putting X on the ground and using contactless payments and making sure to use online waivers and cleaning the iPads and doing all those types of things, so that we can potentially limit, or at least show our medical experts that we're limiting some type of transmission levels while still operating in-person programming. That might significantly reduce the number of people out of the climbing wall. If you had a capacity of 100, 150, you might look at 60 or 40. We're doing the same thing for summer camps. We would put 40 kids in a session. Well, now we're looking at maybe 20 or 15, just to try and make up some of the revenues, because we're having this private university, we're having the layoff conversations already, and we're only 3 weeks in.
Yeah, I think you raised some really great points. I mean, in addition to worrying about what I'll call it, the de-escalation, right? The sort of weaning back off of these practices. One of the things that is going to be an issue for some areas is going to be re-importation of cases. So, and we're already seeing that in other countries across the globe, where they had it contained, they began to relax certain pieces, and they had re-importation of cases. And we're going to have that here state to state, because we have such a drastic difference in caseloads from state to state. And so it turns out the practices are working in some areas. And so the disadvantage to that means they're just susceptible until there's either imported immunity via vaccine or just via exposure. And so I think you raised a really good point around that. Part of the question, I think, is going to be about population density, as far as what practices are going to be allowed, if that makes sense. So whether it's 10 people or 40 people or whatever the magic number is going to be that people are going to allow, some of it's going to be about population density, and then also just the local healthcare sort of capacity. So between those two things, they may decide certain things are not considered essential. A state like Oregon has a vast disparity between our different locales. So we have some very rural areas and we have some very urban areas, which means at a state level, there's always the competition between understanding those differences. And so like you, we're sort of waiting and watching and want to be prepared in either direction to go.
Yeah, no, we're looking at increasing freshman enrollment to try and help mitigate the financial impact, which, is, freshmen need to live on campus. So we're talking about more population dense campus with a huge out of state population. A lot of kids don't come to UM that live in Miami, but we are looking at and preparing for a decrease in international students and programs across all student affairs that would be tailored to international students, because they might not be able to come from their countries or our country's limitations or our state's limitations. And so it's like we're just being asked to, hey, you need 15 scenarios for what this looks like and what it costs for the next 6 to 12 months, basically, is what it looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, and to your point, like when I mentioned that 15% fee decrease, that 15% actually magnifies. It's not 15% of our budget. It significantly diminishes our ability to create income. So the difference there, right? That 15% sort of stops this other stuff as well. Yeah, you raised good points about that.
It's an interesting comment from Reed, and University of Mississippi's been tasked with identifying this as well, but a unique situation where the county is taking over their rec center facility as an overflow COVID hospital. So besides cleaning, is student perception being scared to re-engage with the rec center with that. So if others have had dealings with that, I know that we've, here at the university has asked us to identify one of our rec spaces as potential, if needed down the line. Others? So another question about student engagement. Anybody have any best practices with maintaining a great engagement rate with their student employees, their staff?
I would just say, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say a lot of our efforts are departmentally and are revolving around our student recognition and like end of year stuff, trying to maintain some semblance of what that looked like. I really liked your point earlier, Josh, about like not trying to mimic virtually what we do in the real world, but yet at the same time still like create that outcome for the students, especially for your seniors and people that you might do more mentoring and job counseling with that are going into the recreation field, where the career center might not be able to help them like a professional staff at the rec center might be able to. So a lot of it's not necessarily programmatically about our engagement, but it's about like continuing that mentorship role and year-end type of processes, no matter what they look like.
Yeah. An interesting side product or side benefit maybe that we discovered about a week, maybe a week and a half into some of our programming was we saw a huge number of alumni, some of them 3 years graduated, showing up to our program. So they were re-logging in to the university access and then registering and then that sort of led to all kinds of spin-offs, right? Like the happy hours you were talking about and so forth. They were setting their own up after those particular seminars or those particular Zoom calls. So we thought that was really interesting that on everything that we were doing, we were having between 6 and 8 alum show up. And they're engineers or they work for Intel or who knows. They have totally different lives now, but still somehow it's just interesting that this affinity group became a major factor for them.
Justin, I don't know if you're comfortable sharing, but could you expand a little bit about encouraging the power of positive summit and training students can get paid for participating in?
Yeah, with all of that, our entire department, Campus Rec as a whole, is just encouraging all of our student staff to kind of go through and just read through and more so view all of the Power of Positivity Summit kind of pieces that have been going on since I believe April 2nd or 3rd. And as they do those, we ask all of our students to do a quick write-up on what they kind of got out of it, and then they can put that on their time clock as just another way that they can get paid for kind of some of the weird things that we're all facing right now.
Thanks so much.
I have a question. So I'm Jake Norris, East Tennessee State. Our university has made the call to terminate virtually all student contracts right now. So they're not getting paid. They're not expected to work. And a question that we're running into is when we are ready to repivot and kind of reopen, it's been brought up earlier, that training piece. Do y'all have any methods that y'all are putting out for online trainings? And then for us, a question is, we can't really push that out right now and break Fair Labor Standards law because they're not getting paid right now. So is it ethical to train them at the moment? I don't know. Is anyone else running into that issue right now? Maybe some solutions y'all thought of?
We're also running into that issue. We had to let go all of our student hourly employees. So that includes all of our, I'm at Eastern Washington University, all of our trip leader staff as well. And all of this started happening right before we were about to do our technical trainings for our rock climbing staff and our whitewater staff. So right now we're tentatively postponing that into the fall, and we're just kind of in a waiting game to see what's going to happen at that point. If we're just going to kind of keep pushing it out for that cohort of students, but it's a bummer that there's some students that are going to graduate and not be able to get that training. But for our operations staff, we let go of all of our hourly staff, but we were able to keep on all of our work study staff because they get paid through money that's not going away. And so we created through Canvas, an online learning platform using LinkedIn Learning where they can go on, watch a video, take some quizzes that are associated with it, upload their certificate of completion, and then when we see that they've completed that, they can record like 1.5 hours or however much that video is worth on their timesheet. But that's only available for our work study staff.
My name is Elizabeth Fricky, University of Montana Outdoor Program. We are doing a big staff training for an orientation program that starts in August, and we usually do our training in the spring with a lot of staff that want to, work for us for this extended orientation program. And we had to we're going to start doing it online. So we have 3 different staff trainings that are about an hour and a half each. And I have 2 other facilitators that are helping me with it. And basically we have leadership activities, risk management, breakout rooms, icebreakers. We are giving them homework for the 2nd and the 3rd sessions where they have to do creative presentations in a format of a breakout room where they're teaching, pooping in the woods or bear safety or kitchen safety or lightning or whatever you want them to do. And then we are able to visit each rooms and kind of have a rotation where everybody gets all that information. And so we're just having to get really creative and then we're challenging them because they're not hired yet. So we're just like, put your best foot forward, get as creative as you can, and use technology, use skits, use whiteboards, use the videos, pictures, whatever, and then and just see where it goes. And some that we've seen come in already are actually really creative. And I think especially these younger kids are way more creative than I am because I'm older. But it's just cool to see what we can do with this time and this technology. And so I just think we have to do what we can do, but we can't hire anyone either, but we can interview and do trainings and things like that. So we can hit the ground running when we're able to lift that hiring freeze. So I don't know.
I know here at the University of Mississippi, we are not allowed to require training if we're not paying the students. So I could see us going to some sort of volunteer model where, you know, the training's voluntary, but it will prevent you from having to do a lot of in-person training in a compacted situation, maybe in the fall when it's like, okay, ready, go. So that's just, you know, our university guidelines. It looks like we've got a lot of great things in the chat as far as student employees go. I know some schools can pay, some can't, but creating, making sure that you are keeping record of anything that students do while they're not being paid, I think is a great recommendation. So if anybody has anything more on that, feel free to chime in.
Yeah, can I jump in on that too, Shannon?
Yeah.
I think Steve brings a really good point, which is not just about justification for what's currently happening, but for several of us, we have, especially in the rec sort of world, we've been sort of figuring out, like, what does this mean for eCampus or online students that we are not currently serving, or some of us are collecting fees for? And we've had trouble identifying in the past, like, what does rec sports mean to a student that is not on campus? And this could become, in some ways, the best of it could become some of those pieces. If we ever wanted to expand rec sports fees to eCampus or online students, some of the materials that we're generating and the activities that we're creating now could be an avenue for that. It could be a little bit of a model of something that most of us haven't had the time or energy to really flesh out before now. It's a good point Steve makes.
What are some topics we haven't hit upon yet? Either unmute or throw it in the chat.
I saw last week that, I don't know, it's kind of a regional company, but Landmark Learning out here out of Cullowhee is supposed to be releasing a 4-hour online shelter at home first aid course. So not necessarily wilderness specific, but something to add to programming or supplement, you know, training. If you're able to, maybe you can't train students, but you could get them, you know, medical training. So you could potentially pay students a little bit if you have that like caveat from your financial department or division. Another thing that we've looked at is that with training and certifications is you know, state law is different, but at least the federal law says that you don't have to pay people, you just have to compensate them. And the common practice is to pay people in dollars. But a certification or a credential is also considered compensation. So not necessarily the most ethical thing to do, but if you're looking at like, we can't do this programming without these credentials, these students need these credentials, we can pay for them. You know, we'd like to pay them for that time, but can't otherwise. You know, if that makes sense to you and your leadership, that could be a way around, you know, talk to your HR, make sure that, you know, you're following your state and university policies. But I know that at some previous jobs, we did that where we just had too many students to pay, but because it was required, we did have to compensate them, and that credential was considered compensation.
Yeah, additionally, I think several, well, for example, a bunch of us teach through Solo as the wilderness medicine provider, and they have just released in the last couple of weeks, and mostly online with a field component at the end. So you finish the course, and then before you get your certification, you do a one-day sort of field component. And so I think for a lot of students, there's plenty of work to do there on the front end. And then when we're able to be in person, when these certifications would be appropriate, then there's a quick check off, if you will, which is similar to what you were talking about there, Trey. Yeah. I also wanted to add, when Elizabeth was talking about the stuff they're doing at the University of Montana, sounds pretty amazing. And there's a lot of opportunity for that kind of stuff. Like, we're using breakout rooms within technical sessions. So assigning student leads to each breakout room within technical sessions to monitor some of that. So for example, if there are knots and other particular skills that are going on, you know, it's hard to manage a great number of people through Zoom, but it's easier to manage 4 people through Zoom around specific skills. And I think all of that stuff is pretty great. And I think as we spend more time in it, like was mentioned earlier, our students are figuring this out pretty quick.
All right, we've got about 5 more minutes before we'll have to start wrapping it up. Anything else? Hot topics? While you guys are thinking through this, I do want to make sure everyone's aware that there is a second outdoor roundtable on April 15th at 9 Pacific time. So definitely can ask additional questions there, or just you know, get deeper with some of this stuff. So throw it in the chat if you want more information on certain topics as well. And we can definitely, I'll be helping moderate that one as well, so I can get that to David and make sure we cover it in that one as well. Students, how are you guys feeling? Davis, you know I'm going to call on you.
Hey, Shannon, I was going to check, were you able to add a file in the chat for people?
Yeah, I'm going to post it at the very end. Yes.
Okay, cool. Great.
Davis is sad, but happy to see innovation. Thank you, Davis. He's my GA, one of them. Courtney's my other. My 2 new ones are on too. Hi, guys. All right. Well, if there's no other, it seems like we're kind of wrapping things up, so don't want to keep you guys any longer, but we really appreciate you being here for this roundtable. We hope to see you at the next one. Thank you, Josh, for all of your great content. And I will put a link in the chat before I close out this meeting to the backpacking presentation that he referred to earlier. Thanks, everybody.
Cool. Hey, Shannon, is it okay if I just, can I just say one last thing?
Absolutely.
That'd be all right. Yeah, I just want to remind you all to thank you for being a part of this community. You know, I raised this question a lot, which is, what is the reason we would adventure? Like, why would we as humans care about adventure? And really, my answer is because it builds our adaptive capacity for adversity. It makes us ready to handle tough things. And what would we be if we weren't ready to deploy every bit of adversity training that we've had, if we weren't ready for times like this? And so that includes, one of the biggest things we can be right now, if nothing else, are encouragers. And so thank you for encouraging us as a part of this community. And I know that you're doing the same thing with your students. I mean, literally during this time, some of us are the closest thing we have ever been to healthcare workers because the position our students are in. I mean, they, if it were not for us, they might be isolated. They might not have someone in their corner. And so thanks for being those kinds of people, and look forward to the next time.
Thank you, Josh. That was solid. Appreciate that encouragement. Links are in the chat now. Hopefully they come through okay and are shared correctly. Okay, Josh, can you provide access, open access to those 2 Google Docs?
Yeah, I sure can. Yep.
Okay.
I'll get right on that. Cool.
All right. Sounds good. We'll make sure everybody gets access to the recording and the chat notes. Thanks, everybody.